Hey folks, so today we're going to be talking about the War of 1812, which is an interesting war in American history. It's probably the one that most Americans know very little about. In fact, after this video, you'll probably know more about it than your parents or anybody else that you know. So it's an interesting little war. It's 2 years long. It actually doesn't start until the end of 1812, so it's kind of weird that we call it the War of 1812 when that's not really when it takes place. It's also nicknamed Mr. Madison's War. James Madison was the president of the United States while this war was taking place. And I would argue, despite the fact that it's a little war that doesn't, ring a lot of bells for people, it's probably a really important event, one of the most important events in early American history, in the way that we were going to be viewed on a global stage. So as we're talking through this here, we're going to look at some of the main events. We're not going to go through specifically battle by battle, but I've got kind of an overarching theme that I want you to kind of think about. So this war, I would argue, is about respect, okay? The United States has been their own country since 1789 now, and we've been picked on, right? Go back to the playground analogy, right? Like we've been the new kid on the playground. We've been trying to deal with the other kids, but we're getting picked on and not really treated well, and we're trying to show that we are just as good as anybody else in the global stage or on the playground. So that's kind of where we are with the War of 1812, and we'll see at the end of the war if this war is actually about respect, whether or not we got that respect, okay? So that's kind of what I want you to keep in mind. So this war starts, and I will tell you that the bubble's a little small for you to write this in, so you'll have to kind of squeeze your writing in. But the war starts for several different reasons. So there's a lot of stuff going on in America at this time that's kind of got us all messed up. And some of this, you can kind of think back to like Thomas Jefferson. So remember during Thomas Jefferson, the French and British are both kind of mad at us because we are not agreeing to ally with either one of them in their war, and we're still trading with both of them, right? So this war between Britain and France is threatening our shipping because the French are attacking our ships that are going to Great Britain. The British are attacking our ships that are going to France. The British have been impressing our sailors. So you may remember we talked a little bit about this, where basically what happens is the British board American ships and kidnap American sailors and force them to join the British Navy. Like, that's not cool. Like, you don't do that, right? Like, you're kidnapping us, right? So between commerce, shipping, and kidnapping, right? The British and French are treating us like crap, but it's mostly the British, right? Because the British is the one that's impressing us. The other thing that happens, and this Chesapeake incident is actually an example of impressment, where there's a British ship that attacks the American vessel, the Chesapeake, right off of the coast of Virginia, right? So they say that they're looking for deserters from the British Navy, but they attack American ships, an American ship in American waters, and kidnap American sailors, right? You can see how that's a utter lack of disrespect to us. The British are not treating us as an equal country. So this is a big problem that we're seeing going on here. The other thing that's kind of going on is there are these guys in Congress called war hawks. So war hawks are like the young guns in Congress, okay? Guys like Henry Clay, a man named John C. Calhoun, they are born American. They were born after the American Revolution. And they, like I said, they're the young guys in Congress in their 20s and 30s. And they are increasing the nationalism of America and really what it means to be an American. And they're really kind of calling for war. They're saying, the British are treating us like junk. They're kidnapping our men. They're interrupting our commerce. And the other thing that they kind of want to do is get land in Canada. So at this time, we're really kind of all about expansion. So we've seen the expansion west. Well, these guys in Congress want to expand north as well. So you might remember we tried to take Canada during the American Revolution, and it didn't work, right? So now we're going to try again. These guys are saying, we should expand northern and get to Canada, right? The last kind of thing that we have here is that President Madison really believes that Great Britain is trying to ruin America. The thing that to keep in mind, the British still have Navy vessels in our Great Lakes. They're not supposed to do that. They were supposed to leave at the end of the American Revolution, and they didn't. The British are underhandedly treating trade in terrible ways. They're cutting off our trade, kidnapping our men. And Madison really is going to make an argument to Congress that the British are just not treating us equally. They're not treating us the way you should treat an equal country. And so Madison is really going to push for this war. And that's why it's called Mr. Madison's War, right? So eventually, so all this stuff is kind of going on through Madison's first term as president, right? So eventually, when Madison is reelected, that's when this war is kind of going to take off. And if you look at this map here, this shows you kind of where this war took place, and it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. So mostly you'll see it's up here in kind of like this northern Great Lakes region. And think about why that might be, right? So we're here. Where are the British? Well, they're up here in Canada. So it makes sense that it's British-controlled Canada, right? And also the fact that we're trying to invade Canada, that has a part of that. You'll also see that we're fighting around the capital city. So Washington, D.C. is right here. The British, if you think about strategy of war, they're going to come in and try to destroy our capital. It's good strategy. But we also are going to be fighting around here around the city of New Orleans and the Mississippi River. Remember, the Mississippi River is a trading post. It goes right up here. So we are going to be fighting some battles against them down there as well. So, as I said a moment ago, the War of 1812 kicks off in December, right after Madison's re-election. And we start by fighting in Canada. But here's the problem, okay? Remember, Thomas Jefferson, who had been president before James Madison, cut our military budget. Now, here's the thing. See, Madison and Jefferson were buddies, right? Like, they were besties. But Jefferson pretty much screwed Madison over with this, right? By cutting the military, that caused a lot of problems for us very early on, and we're basically losing left and right on the Canadian border. The Canadians are fighting with the British. They've allied with the British. They don't want to be taken over by us. The British are obviously going to put up a fight, and by 1813, we realized that fighting on the Canadian border is just not going to work. It's not going to be good for us. So this event's really here to show us that we are getting our butts kicked pretty early on in this war. Right. However, in March of 1813, the Americans defeat the British in this amazing attack on the Great Lakes. Now, remember, the British has the biggest navy in the world, and our navy's like this big, right? Like John Adams started our navy, but Jefferson cut it, and so our navy's teeny, teeny, tiny. And so this is a really big victory for us. We are led by two guys, a guy named Isaac Chauncey and a guy named Oliver Perry. And this really kind of shows that we are willing to put up a fight for this. So this is a pretty big victory here for us. The next thing that we've got here is our issues with the Native Americans. So Native Americans are allied with the British during this war. And that kind of makes sense, right? The British are trying to prevent us from expanding any. And Native Americans are like, well, if the British are in this war, maybe these white people will stop moving west, right? And stop encroaching into our territory. And there's this leader named Tecumseh who gets this idea that, you know what, like all the Native American groups, we've been fighting each other because of our like history or our tribal squabbles or whatever. Wouldn't it make more sense is if we made a confederation of all of the different Native American groups and joined together to fight against the white Americans instead of everybody else, right? So Tecumseh puts together this confederacy of Native Americans, and they really attempt to defeat the Americans, keep them from moving west, and they ally with the British, as I said. Unfortunately, William Henry Harrison, who is an American general, fights the forces at the Battle of Thames, and at this battle, he kills, or Tecumseh, the leader, not William Henry Harrison, but Tecumseh is killed in this battle, and the Confederacy collapses under Tecumseh, because without Tecumseh there to hold them together, they really collapse. So this is kind of showing the defeat of the Native American forces as well. The next event that we have takes place in August of 1814. So after our defeat of the British on the Great Lakes, they decided they're going to march south and try to attack our nation's capital. You know, if you burn the capital, that's a big hit to the American people, right? Well, James Madison is in the capital, and he's actually kind of like getting troops together and like trying to protect the troops there in the capital. And so he is not at home at the White House. And Dolly Madison, who is his wife, is at the White House, and she's waiting for him to get back. Like, she is going to wait. Everybody's like, Ms. Madison, you really need to get out of here. Like, the British are coming. They're going to burn down the city. And she's like, nah, I'm away from my husband because I'm not leaving here without him. And so she waits until the last possible minute. But all the while, she's like grabbing whatever she can out of the White House and packing it up. And eventually, she gets word from her husband saying, you need to leave. I will come and meet you. And she manages to save probably one of the most famous portraits of George Washington. Washington had passed away by this point, and so this portrait was a really big deal. You know, he was a really important person. And so this portrait actually still hangs in the White House today, and we can thank Dolly Madison for saving that for us. She's probably our coolest first lady ever. Moving along, this is just an etching that was done at the time that really shows the chaos and devastation of the burning of the capital city. The Capitol, the Capitol building had not even been finished yet. It was burned. The White House was burned. So this is a pretty big blow to the Americans, as you can imagine that it would be. This is just some other pictures of the White House and of the Capitol after the burning of D.C., a sketch of the White House after it had been rebuilt. This next picture is the oldest photograph that we know of the White House. It was probably taken around 1850. In 1929, there was an accidental fire in the White House and it burned again. So you'll notice it looks a little different than it does today. But this is, of course, the modern White House. It hasn't changed a whole lot since that time, but it has gone through the rounds a little bit. Okay, so the next event that we have takes place in September of 1814. So there's a lawyer named Francis Scott Key who'd been trying to kind of work out a deal with the British. And while he is aboard a British naval vessel, he gets in the middle of the British naval vessel gets into a fight with the American forces there outside of Baltimore. And they're attacking Fort Mchenry, okay? So this was a fort that was held by the Americans, and the British are bombarding this fort all through the night. And they won't let Francis Scott Key off the ship. They're basically like, we're fighting this battle. You got to stay here. You're basically in prison. And so Scott Key is watching this battle. And as the sun's going down, he's seeing like bombs going off. And it just looks devastating to him. And he is pretty sure that when he wakes up in the morning, he's going to see a British flag flying over Fort Mchenry, right? He's sure that the Americans have lost, right? But as he wakes up, you know, he's looking through the smoke and the fog to see, and an American flag still waves over Fort Mchenry. They managed to hold the fort. The British did not take it from them. And he is so overwhelmed with the sight of seeing the American flag hanging over the fort. He writes a poem on the back of an envelope, and he calls this poem the Star-Spangled Banner. A few years later, that poem is going to be set to music, to a drinking song. If you think about it, that kind of makes sense, because if you've ever tried to sing the Star-Spangled Banner, you know that pretty much only drunk people are going to try and hit those notes. But it will go on to become our nation's anthem. And we're going to do a little bit more of analysis of the song in class, just to kind of look at what's going on with the song here. So the next picture that I've got here is just a picture of the bombardment of Fort Mchenry. So you can see the American flag flying over the fort there, British ships in the harbor attacking it. Of course, as I said, it's going to be a pretty important battle, if for nothing else that we get the Star-Spangled Banner out of it. So keep going along here. In December of 1814, December 24th, so Christmas Eve, the British and the Americans get together. And they're like, you know what? We're kind of tired of fighting, right? Like, this war kind of sucks. You want to quit fighting? Yeah, sure, we'll quit fighting. So that's the Treaty of Ghent. It's a weird treaty. It doesn't say a whole lot. It's a ceasefire, but it doesn't address impressment. It doesn't address shipping. It doesn't address really anything, right? Like, it's just like, hey, you want to stop fighting now? Yeah, cool, let's stop fighting. It's kind of like, have you ever seen a fight in the cafeteria or something? And these two guys are going at it, right? And they've been fighting for a while, but they get kind of tired, and neither of them really want to stop because they know that they'll look weak if they stop, but they don't really want to keep going, so they kind of look around for somebody to break up the fight, and like, oh, okay, well, they've been broken up, whatever. Yeah, hey, cool, man. So that's kind of what the Treaty of Ghent is. Neither the Americans or British wanted to say, oh, okay, you lose, I win, whatever, but they don't want to keep fighting anymore. So the Treaty of Ghent just is, like I said, it's a weird treaty. It doesn't address any of the issues, but it does end the war, okay? Unfortunately, it's not like they could pick up their cell phones and be like, hey guys, so the war's over now, y'all can stop fighting. So around the same time, there is a battle that happens in New Orleans. They don't know that the Treaty of Ghent has already been signed. This battle takes place after the treaty has been signed. It's like a weird end of the war victory or something. So Andrew Jackson is a pretty major general in the army at the time, and he has a huge victory against British forces in New Orleans. Basically what he does is he and his men hide behind these bales of hay and fire on the British as they are getting off of their ships in the harbor. This is a tactic he had learned from fighting Native Americans. The British kind of saw it as like pretty uncool tactic, but this makes Andrew Jackson really famous. And of course it's like end the war on a bang, like, yay, we won a war, yay, victory. So here's the thing, right? War of 1812 is a weird little war. Lasts for 2 years. Not a whole lot's accomplished. The Treaty of Ghent obviously doesn't accomplish anything. So you might hear people say, and we're actually going to see this in one of the videos we'll watch, where people are like, oh yeah, we definitely lost the War of 1812. Like, sorry to burst your bubble, like totally lost it. I'm going to disagree with that, okay? I don't think we lost the War of 1812 because I think the war was about respect, right? And so when you look at the effects of the war, I think that what you'll be able to see is that we get some of that, right? Maybe we didn't solve a lot of the major issues. Yes, our capital city was burned. Yes, we lost a lot of battles. But we're not British citizens anymore, right? It's not like the British came in and took us over. And I think if you look at the way the British treat us before the war and the way they treat us after the war, you'll see a difference, okay? So let's look at those effects now. So the first thing that happens is the U.S. come to kind of these peaceful relations with each other, right? They agree to certain things where they're going to solve some problems. So first of all, they sign a commercial treaty that reopens trade. So we're going to keep trading with each other. We're not going to attack each other's ships, right? Like, that's not cool. We're going to do that. We draw a line, we take a map, and we draw a line across the 49th parallel. So if you look at this map right here, this is this line up at this top. So basically there had been this dispute between what was America territory and what was Canada, right? So we draw this line right here at the top at the 49th parallel. So we know, okay, this is America, this is Canada, we'll stay here, you stay there, and we hold to that, right? That's a pretty big deal. The other thing that we do is agree to a 10-year joint occupation of the Oregon Territory. So Oregon, right? We hadn't heard about that yet, but Oregon's way up there, in the northwest corner of our country. And the Spanish, the Americans, and the British had all laid claim to New Orleans. And we've been kind of getting into it about who actually controlled New Orleans. So what we decided to do is we're going to the British and the Americans going to ally together. We're going to push out the Spanish, and we're going to keep it together for 10 years. And after 10 years, we'll come back and kind of reevaluate. So if you look, again, here's kind of the territory that had all been disputed. This is kind of what we had all been fighting for. So British up here, America's down here. You can see this is the 49th parallel line. So we all agree to kind of just hang out there together, right? This is not something the British would have done before the war. This is a sign of respect to us, saying that, hey, we get that, you're an equal country now. We're actually gonna work with you to push the Spanish out, and we're gonna keep this country together, right? That's a big deal. It's kind of, you don't share a sandwich with a guy you don't respect, right? Like if somebody comes out and be like, hey man, can I have some of your food? You're not gonna share your food with somebody you don't like and don't respect. Much less territory and land, right? But the British are willing to share this land with us. So that's a pretty big sign of respect to us. The next thing that we have is an agreement in 1817 called the Rush-Bagot Agreement. So what we say is neither the British nor the Americans can keep warships on the Great Lakes. Again, this is a sign that the British are kind of intimidated by American warships. Like, they wouldn't care if they thought they could, defeat our warships. Why would it matter? But we proved that we could defeat their warships, right? We majorly defeated them on the Great Lakes. So this agreement, again, is a way of the British saying, y'all, we respect your territory, just keep your ships off of our Great Lakes, right? Because the Great Lakes are split between the U.S. and Canada. So this has showed that the British are a little bit intimidated. The next thing is that, there had been this thought process after the end of the American Revolution that, oh, that was a lucky punch, right? The French helped y'all out. You know, you couldn't have won the war by yourself. The American Revolution was a fluke. By winning again, or by holding off again, we basically showed that, you know, don't put up a fight with the Americans. The Americans are going to keep going. You can't just defeat them overnight and go home and have a party, right? So we kind of confirm to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world kind of sees this like, you know what, maybe those Americans really do have something going on. Maybe there is something unique about an American citizen, right? So this idea that we won the war twice, we won against the British twice, that shows that maybe we got something, right? We got something. And it shows the rest of the world that. But the last thing it really does is nationalism really starts to grow in our country. People start to be really, really proud of being an American and what it means to be an American, this unique culture that's part of the America culture, right? And this is started by those war hawks in Congress, but it's something that's really going to grow and evolve as we continue to look at our next unit here. We're going to see a lot more nationalism growing in the United States. So, War of 1812, important little war, right? Did we win? It depends on who you ask. You know, we lost a lot of men. We lost a lot of, we lost our city. But we gained respect, you know. So we're going to kind of see that debate as we go more in depth into the war in class. So until then, toodles.